Hi, I'm Jane Ellis with Rediscovered Books, and today I want to talk about Full Spectrum by Adam Rogers. This is a nonfiction book that kind of tackles the history of our relationship with color and pigment, and the history of us discovering and using a lot of different colors and pigments, which sounds really dry, but the way he writes is really, really accessible. It is with enough depth and detail that you really get a lot of information out of the text, while also you're not bored out of your mind and you're not being like deluged with a bunch of speak that is a little more than anyone is really looking for casual conversation. But in the meantime, it is filled with really, really interesting facts and perspectives that make you really rethink how we interact with color in the world and in the things we experience. Like even this book cover, it's covered in color and pigment. And at some point in time, someone had to discover these pigments and figure out how to use them and what they wanted to use them on. And one thing I really, really appreciate with this book in particular is his approach to how he talks about the history of these things, because color is something that every culture has around the world in history. And often when you read some histories, or said to be like expansive histories on a subject, it tends to have a very Eurocentric view, because that's where a lot of the written information that we're pulling from is stored, and where we have a lot of those books talking about such and such history, and oral histories are kind of looked over. He does a really wonderfully done and delicate job of, yes, this pigment is attributed to being discovered by so-and-so whoever, and this is the recorded thing, and if you look it up, that's likely what it'll say. But also, if you look at this group of people in this part of the world a few centuries or even a millennia earlier, it actually, a lot of that pigment can be found here, and it looks like they were using it in a lot of artifacts in this, and then proceeds to also use their words and language for it, which is really incredible. And that happens multiple times throughout the book. And if you find it really interesting, there's also a decent amount of visuals to kind of join you and talk about really cool stuff. And we go all the way back from like ancient history and our use of color as early hominids to the present day, and things like the dress from the 20-teens, and that whole thing where everyone's like, well, no, it's blue and black, or no, it's white and gold, and why that was such a big deal, and how that's a really interesting phenomenon that we think we understand, but we clearly don't quite, because we still can't replicate it, which is really, really, really interesting and fascinating. This is a book that I liked so much that when I finished it, I went back and I listened to it again, because I wasn't quite ready to be done, and I still wanted to be thinking about these subjects and how we relate to these things and how we use color both in the past and the present.
I'd like to talk to you about a particular author, Mary Roach. Now, she writes in a field, science, which normally a lot of folks think of as, oh, it's boring, it's dull. Well, Mary takes a whole different approach to it. Her books tackle some really interesting scientific issues, but she does it from the same standpoint that you and I would, of not having any initial knowledge of the topic. And so she goes in with a fully open mind. But what really sets her apart is, while you're getting a lot of really great information, she has to be one of the snarkiest writers in the field. So at the same time that you're learning a lot of really great details and information, you're also laughing. She is hysterically funny. This one is Science Tackles the Afterlife. Absolutely hilarious. And her most recent one, Fuzz, is about when animals break human laws. All of her stuff is just absolutely hilarious, but you'll also get the added advantage of learning something in the process. Mary Roach.
This is my favorite book so far this year. I had the pleasure of being able to read it prior to it coming out, which was a joy and a blessing, and also a curse, because I could not talk to anyone about it. And the only one person I could talk to about it had heard everything I said already. I read this book in 2 days. It is Babel by Kuang. It relies heavily on history, linguists, linguistics, and magic, which is all really interesting, and colonialism too. That one's a bigger topic. This book I have not stopped thinking about since I had picked it up. It is the best book. I have 5 copies of it. It is not a series. They're just 5 different copies of the book. It's really good. I think you should read it. It is probably the one I will be thinking about for the next 2 years.